Story 1. Shadow in the Basement. When I was a kid, I had an irrational fear of our basement, even though, looking back, it was pretty spooky for a child. Our basement was rather large, featuring an L-shaped couch placed in the center, directly in front of a wooden support column. Right in front of the couch stood the old bulky TV, with all of our video game consoles connected to it. The layout of the basement formed a big circle around the couch. One corner had a booth with a table, another housed an old bar with the laundry room door behind it, and the third, closest to the stairs, led to my dad's little workout room. Since my dad rented out the upstairs to an elderly lady named Ruth, we only had access to the first floor and the basement. Usually, my dad hung out in the living room on the first floor, which is why all our video games were stored downstairs on that crappy TV, since he never really went down there. Being the youngest of 3 siblings, with 2 older brothers, I was between 6 and 8 years old when this all happened. My older brothers weren't home at the time, they were likely at playdates with other kids, so it was just my mom and me, while Dad was probably at work. Normally, I would be playing video games with my brothers in the basement, so I wasn't scared, but since I was alone, I remember feeling especially creeped out as I walked down the stairs. The basement door was a real pain. It wouldn't stay open on its own and would slowly creep shut unless something was propped against it, which made me feel even more cut off from the rest of the house. I sat on that gray, fluffy couch playing old video games, and every little sound in the basement would force me to pause and look around in the direction of the noise. There were always creepy sounds coming from the laundry room that, even though I eventually grew accustomed to them, still sent chills down my spine sometimes. So when I heard an unusual noise from inside the laundry room, not the sound of the washing machine or the boiler clacking, but something dropping and bouncing once or twice, I paused my game immediately. I remember leaping off the couch and dashing upstairs to find my mom, who was calmly saying, "There's someone in the basement." I recall her steady tone as she asked what had happened, then reassured me that no one was down there, in an effort to calm me. She went back down with me to the basement, opened the laundry room door, turned on the light, and peered inside for a few seconds before closing it and declaring that the room was empty. Naturally, that made me feel better, and after she went upstairs, I returned to my video games. I can't recall exactly how long it took, but eventually I went back upstairs to have a snack while my mom was already preparing dinner. I remember it being dark outside, which only deepened my fear of the basement, since it had 2 small windows that let in some daylight but left it completely pitch black at night. Despite that, I ended up returning down there later, and eventually I heard the heater in the laundry room kick on, only it was incredibly loud. I turned around and noticed the laundry room door was now open. Getting off the couch, I slowly approached the open door. Inside, it was pitch black, and I was too scared to turn on the light. I just wanted to shut the door. Gathering all my courage, I ran to the door, slammed it shut, and bolted back to the couch, where I inexplicably felt safer. For some reason, I never thought it was odd that the door had magically reopened, even after my mom had closed it earlier. The next thing I recall is hearing a man's voice behind me, and at first my mind couldn't register it. It didn't seem real. I turned around to see a sickly-looking man sitting in a booth in the basement's corner, his arm resting on the table and his head supported by his fist, saying, "My God, how you've grown." I was frozen stiff, unable to scream, my mouth hanging open in shock as I stared at him, trembling. Slowly, he stood up in a crooked, hunched posture and started shuffling toward me while saying, "Your mother won't let me see you guys." Finally, I managed to scream and bolted for the stairs, yelling, "Mom," all the way to the kitchen. I slammed and locked the basement door, screaming and crying to my mom that there was a man downstairs. I saw the look on her face, she was petrified, and she immediately called 911. I strangely don't recall the moments before the police arrived. I only remember a swarm of officers coming and going down to the basement. I ended up in a safe room with my mom and a police officer while they found him, and the man turned out to be my estranged uncle, my mom's brother, who had been excommunicated from our family for being a child rapist. Our parents had never wanted him near us, and my mom avoided any contact with him. He had broken into our house and been hiding in the basement for who knows how long. I hadn't even seen his face since I was a baby. He was eventually sent back to prison for another 4 years on another sex crime, and we still don't know where he is now. Story 2. Hiding Shadows. It was approaching Halloween, in mid-October, and for my cousin Andy's 12th birthday, which falls on October 15th, we all headed over to our Uncle John and Aunt Melissa's house for a big family party. Our extended family is huge, so our gatherings can get pretty hectic, but since it was still warm outside, the party was mainly held in the backyard. Their house is enormous, and we always loved playing hide-and-seek games there because of all the secret spots. Andy and I are the same age, and my older brother Chase, who is 2 years older than me, also joined in the fun. Even our older cousins played with us, making teams and taking turns as hiders and seekers. If you were caught hiding, you had a chance to run outside into the backyard to be safe, and we could use the entire house, except for our aunt's and uncle's bedroom. I'm not exaggerating when I say there were hundreds of possible hiding spots in the basement. In one room, which we dubbed Aunt Melissa's fashion room, because she's a fashion designer with a collection of mannequins in various outfits, we had a perfect setting for a game. Inside, there were mannequins, some full body, some just torsos without heads, and various stands, studio lights, camera equipment, and even a green screen drop. We'd been playing the game for a while already when Chase and I chose different hiding spots in the basement. Chase hid in the main section, and I headed into the fashion room. I even grabbed 2 blankets from an ottoman and brought them into the room, one for me to hide under, and the other to drape over one of the mannequins as a decoy, making it look like a person was hiding underneath. I thought it would be a funny little surprise whenever someone yanked the sheet off, so I settled in under a desk in the room, tucked under the blanket, and waited. That waiting game was a big part of the fun if your hiding spot was good. After what felt like a long time, I began to hear commotion outside in the main basement, where Chase and one of my cousins were laughing and yelling, probably because Chase was being chased around. I then heard them stomping up the stairs. Chase was trying to escape into the backyard without getting tagged. After that, I waited in silence for over 10 minutes, growing increasingly uncomfortable and honestly a bit bored. Finally, Chase came back downstairs, calling my name and announcing that food was being served outside, which meant the game was over. I was starving. I rushed upstairs to the backyard, where all the catered food had been set out, and later, while chatting with Aunt Melissa after eating, I suddenly remembered that I'd left both blankets in the fashion room. More importantly, one of the blankets was still draped over a mannequin, which I knew would upset her. After using the bathroom, I went back down to the fashion room, turned on the light, and was startled to see that the blanket was no longer on the mannequin. It was covering something else. It appeared to be another mannequin, but this one was propped in a seated position, which was odd because I hadn't seen any mannequins like that before. As I drew closer, I realized it was moving and I could hear soft breathing coming from beneath the blanket, along with an unusual odor. There was clearly a person under there, so I shouted, "Who is that?" but received no answer. I looked down to try to see what shoes they might be wearing, but all I saw were bare feet belonging to a black person, which was strange since no one at the party was black. I quickly turned and rushed for the door, alerting my uncle to call the police because there was someone in the basement. Others overheard me, and panic spread fast. My uncle and a few family members rushed down to the fashion room, and I followed behind. When we arrived, the blanket had fallen to the floor, and whoever was underneath had vanished. I swore there had been someone there, based on the bare feet and the smell, and after a frantic search, my uncle eventually called the police, taking my claim seriously. When the officers arrived, the scene was chaotic. Everyone at the party was worried, and even neighbors came out to see if everything was all right. They checked every possible hiding spot, but no one was found in the house. I wasn't making it up. What I saw was genuine, and I only wished that everyone else could have seen it for themselves. Since parties lasted for hours with unlocked doors and family constantly moving in and out, it wasn't surprising that someone from the street might have walked in, perhaps a homeless person, which might explain the smell. Still, the whole ordeal felt incredibly bizarre, and it remains a haunting memory. Story 3. Basement Echoes. This story takes place when I was 9 years old, even though I'm almost 25 now. I was at my great-grandfather's house in Idaho during Christmas break, visiting family and all that, and it was also the first year my mom's boyfriend joined us, following my parents' divorce the previous summer. My grandpa used to live in a small town on an Indian reservation with about 1,000 people, and his house was a modest 2-story home surrounded by fields and forests, a beautiful property that I miss dearly. About a day after we arrived, my aunt, uncle, and cousins from our town came to surprise us, having driven 10 hours after initially saying they couldn't make it because of work. It was a lot of fun because my cousins and I were close at the time. One night, my uncle, my step-aunt, and a cousin who lived next door to my grandpa came over to visit everyone. While the grown-ups chatted, my cousins, Sam, who was 9, Evan, who was 12, and Kennedy, who was 10, and I decided to go downstairs to play our monster game. The rules were simple. Sam and Evan were the monsters and hid in the basement with the lights completely off, while Kennedy and I had to find them. They would make occasional noises to give us hints, but if we got too close, they'd make scary monster sounds, forcing us to retreat back upstairs, the designated safe zone. Looking back, it seems like a silly game, but at the time it was both frightening and fun. Sam and Evan went downstairs and told us to wait for 2 minutes before we began our search, so Kennedy and I waited at the top for 2 minutes before heading down. Kennedy went in first, and we started looking for them in our usual way. It was pitch black downstairs, the only light came from the pellet stove and the moon shining through a window, and although we knew our cousins were hiding, the darkness made it all seem extra scary. About 5 minutes later, Sam and Evan jumped out to scare us, and then they chased us back upstairs. We decided to play another round, following the same rules: wait 2 minutes, then go down. This time, I went first. As I descended, I heard what sounded like either Sam or Evan hitting a wall, which made me jump. Continuing down, I noticed a figure standing outside a window and stopped in my tracks, holding out my hand to signal Kennedy to stop. She grew a bit irritated and asked, "Come on, why are you stopping?" I didn't say much but pointed toward the window to show her the figure, and soon Kennedy whispered, "Sam, Evan, we need you to stop the game, there's someone standing outside." Surprisingly, Sam responded, as if he didn't want to end the game, saying, "You guys are lying, you're just scared." I was growing upset because they wouldn't believe us. "Seriously, look at the window above the TV." Then we saw Sam and Evan emerge from under the ping-pong table that my grandpa had provided, and they looked up. Evan even laughed a little, suggesting it was probably Uncle Stan, who usually smoked on the front porch near the front door, but I knew it wasn't Uncle Stan because he never went near that window. I then told Evan that Sam had, then Sam, annoyed, said, "It's probably Grandpa, just checking the house, like he always does." I decided to go upstairs and check, pretending I was looking for something, and found that everyone I knew was in the living room. It wasn't Uncle Stan or Grandpa, everyone was there. My stomach sank, there was definitely someone else out there. I didn't want to alert the adults in case they wouldn't believe me, so I went back downstairs, shaking, and told the others that everyone was in the living room and that someone was lurking outside. Sam and Evan finally realized this wasn't a joke, and their faces turned from mischievous to scared. Kennedy even started to cry a little. I told her to keep quiet, and we all went up the stairs to decide what to do. Of course, Sam and Evan gave silly ideas like, "Shoot the guy," but we didn't want to tell the adults. After waiting for about 5 minutes upstairs, we went back down, and the mysterious figure was gone. We assumed he'd just left. We decided to stop playing the game and switch to playing ping pong instead. When we turned on the basement light, we noticed that one of the windows was cracked open. I thought to myself, was this window cracked open all this time? Then I looked over at the furniture, and my heart sank. There was a man in his mid-40s sitting in one of the sofa chairs, staring at us. We were so terrified that we froze, and then the man began to smile creepily at us before standing up. I yelled, "Run," and we all bolted up the stairs, slamming the basement door behind us. We rushed into the living room, crying and telling our family that there was a man downstairs. One of my uncles, who was a cop, grabbed one of my grandpa's guns and headed down. After a few minutes, my uncle returned and said there was no one down there, so we assumed the intruder had escaped through the window. The adults took our story seriously, especially since there were footprints in the snow leading to Grandpa's driveway, even though nothing was stolen. We were all so shaken that we huddled with our moms that night. I ended up sleeping in my mom's bed with my cousins because I was still scared. I haven't played that game since. Grandpa was very upset because he believed his windows shouldn't be accessible from the outside, though he was glad we were unharmed. Grandpa passed away in October 2017, and I miss him dearly, but ever since that incident I've been terrified of entering any basement alone, even now.